Hello, gentlemen. Today's writing workshop video tutorial is about using quotes. The ability to use a quotation from the text is a pretty sophisticated tool, and it indicates your level of sophistication as a writer. So we're going to talk about that in this video. I've chosen this quote from Of Mice and Men. Why he'd do any damn thing I told him. If I told him to walk over a cliff, over he'd go. That wasn't so damn fun after a while. So this is a quote that happens fairly early in the novel when George and Slim are speaking with each other. So what I need to have when I'm using a quote is a really good lead-in sentence that leads into the quote. And the lead-in sentence should supply context, and context includes things like where we are in the story and who the speaker is. So you orient your reader to where you are in the novel. And too often what people will do for a lead-in sentence applying context is they will write things like this. In chapter 2. And then that will suffice as a lead-in. Well, that's not supplying any context for me. That tells me where we are within the pages of a book, but it doesn't tell me where we are in the story. So your lead-in has to orient your reader to where you are in the story. So I would say, write something like this. In Slim, George sees someone in whom he can confide. All right, I'm getting there. That's a fairly decent but general sentence. So I would want to get a little bit more specific before I come into this quote. And I would say, after Slim asks why he and Lenny travel together, George tells a story about Lenny's loyalty. Okay, so now I've gotten quite a bit more specific. I'm not merely saying where we are in the book, I'm saying where we are in the story. So we have this notion that George and Slim are having a conversation together. And then I get more specific by saying it's when Slim asks about them traveling together. And somebody who has read the novel will know that that happens fairly early in the novel. George and Slim don't have that many conversations with each other. So this sort of in-depth conversation should orient an educated reader. And then I indicate who the speaker is by saying George tells a story. All right, so now I've got my lead-in sentence supplying context, and I've got my quotation. So I'm going to make sure that I properly cite my quotation. Now, of course, I need the quotation marks, the opening quotes, and then the end quotes. And now you'll remember that periods, colons, semicolons, and commas at the end of quotations disappear. So I'll have my end quotation mark, a space, the parentheses, author's last name if it's the first quote, the page on which I found this quote, the end parentheses, and then don't forget that end period. Nobody gets to end your sentence except you. So now this is properly cited and properly quoted. Now, because it's dialogue, you have the option of also indicating that it's dialogue by having that single quote at the beginning, at the end. Remember, this is Steinbeck's words. If this quotation marks means Steinbeck's words, this single mark means it's dialogue. So you have that option, but because I'm only quoting dialogue, I'm going to opt for the cleaner, regular old quotation marks. All right, and I'm not done. And what a lot of people will do is end right here, and then they will move on to their next example. And that's not acceptable. You need to explain the quote. Explaining the quote doesn't mean putting the quotation in your own words. An educated reader can read the quote and knows what it means, what the words mean. So what they're looking for, what the reader is looking for, is your analysis. And that would look something perhaps like this. George, sensing Slim's goodness, uses this moment as a confession, revealing both Lenny's innocence and his own regret, getting a little bit low here, his own regret at taking advantage of his friend, period. Okay, so I've analyzed the quote. We get a sense in this part of the quote that wasn't so damn fun after a while that George regrets it. And we need to somehow convey this idea that George is a compassionate man. And so him finding somebody in whom he can confide, which he certainly can't do with Lenny, and then him being honest about his behavior reveals his goodness, and does a nice job of analyzing that quote. So then I would simply just put the whole thing together in terms of proper spacing, and that's how you properly lead into, quote, cite, and analyze a quotation. Good luck.